Illithids do possess a growing deadly force on many worlds. However, their threat remains cloistered in dark, subterranean places, far removed from the concerns of the world above, or else lost in the darkness of the wild space between worlds. Any who journey into these forbidden places need fear encountering the still smoldering Illithid anger, born in the ruin of their past empire. Any who undertake such a perilous endeavor need fear their race-wide resolution to put out the myriad suns, to darken the light, and to plunge us all into inimicable black. Chapter 1. Mind Flayers. An Introduction. From their very inception in TSR Studios' newsletter, something about these creatures has captured the hearts and minds of players and DMs alike of Dungeons & Dragons. They feel immediately like they fill a gap in folklore. Their iconic faces, their twisted intellect, their domineering sense of superiority, and their terrifying psionic powers. Yes, those of us who run the games are smitten. The Illithid have appeared in every monster manual since their creation. They're an established part of canon, and we DMs love to toss them at our players. And our players who kept their intelligence low in character creation love to hate these beasts, who can, with a flick of their wrist, leave them stunned and defenseless en masse. Oh yes, brains are tasty. Wicked parasites and hunters of sapient peoples, the Illithid devour minds, literally, and enslave what they do not eat. Their race-wise resolution, as outlined earlier, is to put out the myriad suns, to darken the light. They're a ridiculously over-the-top enemy. When a Mind Flayer is on the scene, moral ambiguity of all sorts takes a back seat. See a squid face, kill a squid face, leave the world a better place. But if you've watched as much of the publicly available D&D as I have, and there's a real chance that if you're watching this that you might have, you realize the DMs want a little more for their Mind Flayers. From Matt Mercer's Clarota to Matt Colville's Suliran, something about these horrifically powerful devourers of thought makes DMs want to play with them.
You hear a voice in your head say, I haven't eaten anyone's brain in hours.
Who knows what that might be? But how are you to run a Mind Flayer convincingly? Stray too far from its twisted nature and you lose the essence of the thing entirely. Stick to that essence without care, and your players will be forced to murder it on the spot. No, to play a Mind Flayer, we need to understand the Mind Flayer. But to understand the Mind Flayer, there's one thing we need to understand first. Part 2. Mind Flayers and Ethnonationalism. Brief footnote here. The most recent edition of Dungeons & Dragons is a little light on Mind Flayer lore, opting to leave most of the finer details to you. The monster manual has a page of information and a page devoted to a stat block. Whilst Volo's Guide to Monsters later fleshed them out considerably, there are still several blanks left to fill. For those, I have used Bruce R. Cardell's The Illithid, which A. Great pun, Bruce, I love you, and B. Great 2nd edition sourcebook, full of good stuff, would recommend. Anyhow, this word, which is appearing on your screen now, is one that YouTube is having a bit of an issue with currently, so I'm going to be calling it Ethnonationalism. Ethno, a predisposition to caring about ethnicity and race, and nationalism, caring about nationality and citizenship quite a bit. Umberto Echo, cultural theorist, talked about how this kind of philosophy can be difficult to define because it's more of a system that manipulates feelings than a coherent intellectual framework. He lists 14 general properties of the ideology, and we're going to have a look at 5 main ones here. Ethnonationalism Principle 1. Disagreement is treason. One mark of ethnonationalism is a framing of everything in terms of a deadly cultural war. Even the smallest of disagreements cannot be tolerated, for the same reason generals don't allow for minor insubordination on the battlefield. Any questioning of an authority figure is explicitly forbidden, and worse than forbidden, is treated as a moral failing. Why are you questioning our leader? Do you want the enemy to win? Each Mind Flayer colony, from those deep in the belly of the Underdark to those between worlds, is led by an elder brain, a gigantic pile of grey matter that sits in a brine pool, constantly attended by other Mind Flayers. Its psychic power is considerable. Every Mind Flayer within 5 miles is connected, and the brain can have several conversations at once. As the Illithid tells us, one central tenet of Mind Flayer culture is all wisdom flows through the elder brain. The Illithid also tells us, hilariously, that this brain is queried several times a day by other Illithid, managing anything from legal precedent to tunnel engineering to psychic reference and even psionic instruction. Something about that I love is just the idea that the Illithid can't even build a tunnel properly and use this fantastic psionic bastion as a glorified calculator or school teacher. It's hilarious. But those brains aren't exactly alone in their pools. Not even close. Ethnonationalism Property 2. Contempt for the weak. Each clutch of Mind Flayers start off as tiny, sub-sentient tadpoles fighting for nutrients in the brine pool above the elder brain. All those who fail to outcompete their fellows will starve and die, their corpses becoming nutrition for the elder brain beneath. Only 1 or 2 in every 1,000 will survive the 10-year maturation process, and every one of those is accepted into the colony as the strongest of the strong. For the Illithid, and indeed for the Ethnonationalists, the weak are nothing but contemptible resources, spare parts, grist for the mill. The colony, the nation, the state is fit only for the strong, and if Mind Flayers are so discerning as to gladly sacrifice 99.8% of their own mists, how do you think they view others? Ethnonationalism Property 3. Fear of Difference. Trigger warnings for genocide and anti-Semitism up front. This is actually the greatest motivator for modern ethno-nationalism, and is why you'll see current ethno-nationalists so concerned with immigration and the Great Replacement, as they call it. The love they have for their country is conditional on that country looking and behaving like them. This fear of difference plays out in a very interesting way for the Illithid. The Mind Flayers you see around yourself, the ones who walk around on their 2 feet, are actually a result of that tadpole we mentioned earlier being implanted in the brain of a usually unwilling host in a process called Ceremorphosis. The victim's brain is partially consumed, and the Illithid parasite can now drive the body around. Morphological changes quickly follow: an elongation of the skull, a growing of 4 characteristic tentacles around the face. Mind Flayers see the other, and they are driven to purge, either to corrupt and replace the other with a version of themselves, or to purge the other of its conscious will and transform it into a mindless thrall, incapable of even considering rebellion. Mind Flayers and Mind Campers share this key trait, the desire to look outwards and see nothing but themselves, to have all who do not look like you either purged or, at the very least, brought low. Of course, the Mind Flayers weren't all that much more successful than Hitler's Germany was. Though the scale of their crimes were both unspeakable, you'll notice that I do speak of both of them in the past tense. In the case of the Illithid, it wasn't a foreign force that crushed the empire. It was a woman. Her name was Gith, and she successfully led a slave rebellion, waking up thralls everywhere, all over the Mind Flayers' huge empire. An empire that the Gith, as her people have come to be called, successfully smashed to pieces. Those Mind Flayers that survive do so in the darkest corners of the multiverse, and each seethes with a burning memory of all that they have lost. Ethno-nationalism Property 4. The enemy is both weak and strong. One interesting facet about ethno-nationalists, both real and fictional, is that there is a pretty obvious contradiction in their primary belief. They consider themselves superior They fear the different. They view the other as weak. But at the same time, this other, this enemy, must be considered to be a vast and terrifying threat to motivate the populace into the kind of war readiness that facilitates an absolute respect for authority. You see this in Hitler's Germany, where the Jewish people were simultaneously viewed as weak, inferior, and just happening to have a huge amount of cultural and financial power. You see it too in the Illithid loathing of the Gith raiding parties. No Illithid considers any Gith to be above any Mind Flayer, and they all consider the Gith to have not just damned the Illithid, but themselves too, for surely their lot was better under the Illithid's firm guiding hand. But still, they fear the raiding parties when they come, finding themselves caught in a rapt terror. It's that terror that prevents the Illithid from bothering most of the people who live on the surface. They must scurry and work in the shadows, for to operate too openly would be to advertise too loudly their location to the Gith. You could, at this point, if you were a leftist, draw an interesting parallel between the Gith and Antifa. Both are involved in direct action just to raise the cost of their enemies going ahead of their plans. The existence of Antifa, for instance, makes it harder for ethno-nationalists to organize and to recruit, and the existence of the Gith does the same to the Illithid, although the methods of organization and recruiting are obviously quite different in each case. And you could, if you were slightly more aware of the left, draw a further parallel to the fact that the Gith's single force against the Illithid fractured not because of Mind Flayer involvement, but because of Gith internal infighting. And at that point, you'd have to consider your audience, and abruptly change the subject. Ethno-Nationalism, Property 5. The Cult of Death. Now this is an interesting one. In ethno-nationalism, everyone in the in-group is trained to be a hero, or at least brought up with the expectation that they should be prepared to act like one. This heroism carries all the way to death. To die for one's country is, of course, the highest of honors. As Echo writes, your ethno-nationalist hero is impatient to die. In his impatience, he more frequently sends other people to death. So too it is with the Mind Flayer. When the Illithid die within the confines of their colony, they believe their intelligence lives on forever inside the central authority of the Elder Brain. To be exiled from the colony, therefore, is a fate much worse than death, for that is the true cessation of consciousness, which otherwise they believe can't happen. Unlike most peoples in D&D, Mind Flayers don't worship gods in a traditional sense. Their souls don't go to any afterlife mortals know about. If an Illithid dies, they die happy if they die within the confines of the colony, because they know, or they believe, that they get to live on forever as a crucial part of the Elder Brain. Interestingly, they also believe that this system is a competition. The greater you are judged to have performed in life, the more authority and privileges you are to be given inside the central consciousness of the Elder Brain. Therefore, all Illithid are secretly in a kind of sick contest with each other. They can't openly act to sabotage their compatriots, but every success a neighbor makes is just another success they have to outshine to earn their own rightful place in the Elder Brain. In this way, the Illithid, much like the ethno-nationalists we've been comparing them to, is almost a creature of pity. Their beliefs and the way they've structured their lives have trapped them in a toxic framework where they distrust those around them, are beholden to a central authority figure they cannot question, fear every day the work of a powerful enemy they believe themselves to be the rightful better of. It's almost enough to make you feel for them. Almost. Ethno-nationalism as applied to Illithid. Problems. There are some issues with this reading of Illithid, however. Machismo can be a big property of ethno-nationalism, for instance, and to what extent a genderless society can fall into that kind of toxic gendered belief system is up for debate. Mind Flayers do not engage in a rejection of modernism. They are wonderful and devious inventors and creators. They don't engage in action for action's sake. They're rather happy to scheme and to plan, actually. And they don't have a cult of tradition. Now, Umberto Echo wasn't writing for the Illithid brain. It's unclear how many of these conditions or properties really apply to fantasy creatures. Illithid live as obligate carnivores, for instance. They must devour sentient brains to survive. They're not in a great position to develop empathy for the weak, or other races in general, at all. But while the system does have its limits, what interests me is how that when we as humans try to create an enemy to be domineering, to be cruel, to hate the other, to follow its leaders without question, when we create an enemy to be powerful, to be uniform, to be terrifyingly unempathetic, well, we do tend to fall into describing an enemy that fits to an eerie degree some of the central tenets of ethnonationalism. Part 3. How do I use this anyway? But I can hear you now, dear viewer. Is this channel called Building Better Dungeons or Bad Boring Digbats? Well, for one, that hurts. It does hurt me. For two, well, I don't know how useful that kind of question is to a DM. As a DM, you'll often be asked to adjudicate impossible situations, to create from whole cloth people or societies or systems of magic or cosmology. None of your games are likely to suffer from a lack of any particular knowledge, but all of your games could be improved. Any linguistics you learn can be peppered into your NPC's words to give your culture a real sense of verisimilitude. Any chemistry or physics you pick up will help you to know how to respond when your player tries to use ice magic to shatter a door lock, for instance. Any information on societal structures will come up when you're trying to structure a society. The best DM isn't necessarily the most prepared, or the cleverest, or the one who's doing the best voices. I think the best DM is a curious one. The one who is open to learning and using new information. If you understand what kind of things you can do to make your society resemble ethnonationalism, then you'll know how to invoke the kind of feeling that ethnonationalism stirs within your players. Spare a thought for your Mind Flayer. Do they like the society in which they live? Do they revel in the condemnation of the weak? Do they worship slavishly the unquestionable authority of the immortal elder brain? Or is there a niggling doubt in their mind? Do they question the cult of death? In their twisted and devious mind, can they imagine even something so disgusting as an appreciation for the other? The Monster Manual offers one reason why an Illithid might leave their colony. They could be banished for using magic, attracted to the power of the forbidden arcane, and banished from their psionic brethren. But maybe, my dear DMs, you can start thinking of other reasons. And if you can, you're well on your way to building better Mind Flayers. Thanks for listening.
Thank you.